Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Josh Minkler. I'm the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Indiana. With me today is from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Paul Holdeman. Paul will be speaking with you today after me. Also with me today, to my left, is Federal Bureau of Investigation Supervisory Special Agent Brian Monahan, who supervises the Public Corruption Squad at the FBI. He's present here today, but will not be speaking to you. Also with me today, to my far right, your left, is Assistant United States Attorney Tiffany Preston. Ms. Preston will be the individual prosecuting this case in court. She will not be speaking to you today. After I finish with my remarks, if we have time, we'll take a few questions. We're here on the indictment of Mayor Dennis Tyler. You should have been provided with a copy of that indictment. We have copies of it for you. We also have a copy of a press release which details the penalties and the charge and matters such as that. So does that work for you? Yes. All right, good. So last week, a federal grand jury sitting right here in Indianapolis, Indiana, over at the federal courthouse, indicted Mayor Dennis Tyler of Muncie, Indiana, on a public corruption charge. This morning, Mayor Tyler was arrested by federal agents at his home, and he was arraigned before a federal judge. He has been released on conditions of release, and an automatic not guilty plea has been entered. The indictment has allegations that are very straightforward. As alleged in this indictment, the people of Muncie, Indiana, in a Democratic election, elected Mayor Dennis Tyler as Muncie City Mayor in 2012. Since then, as mayor, Dennis Tyler has held a position of public trust. It is the highest elected position in the city of Muncie. As alleged in the indictment, between 2014 and August of 2016, Mayor Dennis Tyler broke that trust. The indictment charges Mayor Dennis Tyler with one count of theft of government services. What the indictment alleges is that he accepted a $5,000 illegal cash payment from a local contractor through an individual by the name of Tracy Barton. Tracy Barton was formerly Muncie's superintendent of sewer maintenance and engineering until he was indicted last year. It alleges that the $5,000 was an illegal cash payoff for the mayor's unlawful efforts to ensure that the local contractor was awarded lucrative contracts, and the mayor used his influence and control to do that. The penalties for this charge is a maximum of 10 years imprisonment and up to a $250,000 fine. For those of us that grew up in the 60s and the 70s, there was a clarion call for public service. All of us heard it time after time. Growing up in small towns and cities here in Indiana, we heard it from our teachers, we heard it from our parents, we heard it from our friends. And for those of you familiar with that time period, you'll remember that call to public service. As I say the words, they'll come back to you. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And for many of us, that was a reason to go into a life of public service. As I've stood up here time and time again, all of us have borne witness to a perversion of those words. Elected and appointed public officials in this district ask, what can the community I serve do for me? How can I benefit from my elected or appointed position? When people in positions of public trust choose to line their pockets at the expense of the very people they serve, the costs can be massive. And to be clear, I'm not talking about just simply accepting $5,000 in cash. I am first talking about a loss of trust. In a democracy, people believe that those who they elect serve them first, not themselves. It also results in a loss of hope, particularly for those without means. They want to be treated fairly by their government officials, whether they have the money to pay a bribe or not. And it also finally results in a loss in the basic belief that your government exists to serve the public. In a republic where the people are sovereign, that cannot stand. Public officials must serve the public and not serve themselves. And when there is a pattern of that not occurring, it calls for the intervention of federal law enforcement, the intervention of the Department of Justice through the United States Attorney's Office and through the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Those agencies must work to restore that public trust in a democracy and in a republic. This brings us, of course, to the city of Muncie, Indiana. It is the 7th largest city in the Southern District of Indiana. It is the home of Ball State University, and it is the home of many hardworking and honest Hoosiers. When I grew up, we would talk about the sociologists referring to Muncie, Indiana, as Middletown, USA. It was the average or typical American city. I've been the United States Attorney in this district since 2014. 4 of those 5 years have been spent investigating public corruption in Muncie, Indiana. My office has led Operation Public Trust in Muncie, Indiana, and that investigation is ongoing today. The results of that investigation are well reported. The work may not be. The investigation has included, among other things, nearly 200 subpoenas, grand jury and administrative subpoenas that have been served on public officials, individuals, and record keepers with knowledge of the goings-on in Muncie, Indiana. It has included hundreds of witness interviews by FBI agents and attorneys in this office. It has included obtaining dozens and serving those dozens of search warrants in and around Muncie, Indiana. It has involved hours and hours of physical surveillance and the review of thousands and thousands of documents. It has resulted in the following indictments. Craig Nichols, Muncie's building commissioner, who was appointed by Mayor Tyler, pled guilty in 2018 to wire fraud and money laundering out of a big rigging scheme which he steered work to his own companies, inflated the cost of that work, and concealed his ownership interests. It involves the indictment of Tracy Barton, Muncie's superintendent of sewer and maintenance, who was charged in 2018 with a similar kickback and bid rigging scheme. It involves the indictment of Jeff Burke, a local contractor who has been charged with bank fraud. It has involved the indictment of Rodney Barber, a local contractor who has been charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and tax charges. It has involved the indictment of Nikki Grigsby and Tony Franklin. Nikki Grigsby is the current administrator of the Muncie Sanitary District. The accusation is that she conspired with Franklin to steer contracts from the sanitary district to Franklin. That is 6 individuals. Today, I'm announcing the indictment of the 7th individual, Mayor Dennis Tyler, the highest ranking city official in the city of Muncie. This could be, and probably indeed is, a sad day for the people of Muncie. But for those people, my message is simple. They, like any other Hoosier, deserve the best from their elected officials. And for those who abuse that power, they will be held justly accountable, and this office will do it. I would like to thank the agents who have worked so long on this case from the FBI. They've asked to remain anonymous, and I would hope you would respect that. But they've worked hours and hours on this case over the last 4 years. I would like to publicly thank Assistant United States Attorney Tiffany Preston, who has led this investigation from day one, who has made many strategic decisions in the investigation and charging of this case that has brought us to this day. Although it is a sad day, the future is brighter. This office will continue to hold those accountable who violate the public trust. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce a partner in this investigation and prosecution, an agency that has taken the lead in this, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Paul Holdeman of the FBI. Paul.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Minkler. Good afternoon. So we're here today to talk about public corruption. It's the FBI's #1 criminal priority. When our elected officials use their position to serve themselves rather than serve the citizens who they represent, it shakes the public confidence and undermines the strength of our democracy. As a citizen, as a taxpayer, we should be outraged when people who represent us take advantage of the position and profit from it to use it for their own gain. As alleged in the indictment, the mayor of Muncie, Dennis Tyler, accepted a payment from a city contractor for personal benefit. It calls into question whether taxpayer funds were used most efficiently to benefit the citizens of the community. Most elected officials are hardworking and honest in their dealings. But when they're not, then they should be and will be held accountable. Let me be clear, the FBI and our law enforcement partners will continue to investigate illegal activity, whether conducted by public officials in Muncie, around the state of Indiana, or throughout our country. Public corruption is difficult to investigate. Oftentimes it involves secret meetings between government officials and outside entities. Therefore, we need your help. If citizens identify potential payments to influence government officials and their activities, we need you to come forward, come to us, come talk to us, come give us a call. I want to acknowledge the hard work of the FBI investigative team, the IRS Criminal Investigative Division, and the federal prosecutors from U.S. Attorney Minkler's office. We still have much work to do, but the indictment and arrest are a few tangible public-facing actions that demonstrate our unwavering efforts to ferret out public corruption. Thank you. Back over to U.S. Attorney Minkler.
Thank you, Paul. Questions?
So will the mayor be able to continue the rest of his term now that you're letting him out of prison?
Well, the decision of whether or not he wants to remain mayor for the rest of his term is up to him. And if he decides not to, that's a matter that Indiana law speaks to. In court today, he represented to the judge that he would still be employed through December 31st, 2019. I only know of one job he has, so it sounds like he intends to continue to be the mayor despite these charges.
Does that bother you?
Of course it does. People are presumed innocent until proven guilty, but the charges that we have investigated in Muncie throughout the last 4 years have painted a pretty bleak picture. And it seems to me that even in this case, at some point, there needs to be a change. And candidly, our goal is to get this case into a trial, to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and to make sure he can never be a public official again.
Josh, could you explain how the scheme worked and how it fits into the overall mosaic of all the other alleged?
Sure. What's alleged in the indictment is that there were contracts, lucrative contracts, and those were awarded under the mayor's influence and control. And in exchange for awarding those contracts, as alleged in the indictment, he received a cash payment of $5,000. That's about as straightforward an indictment for public corruption as you're going to see.
Did the contractor know that he was paying the mayor $5,000, or the contractor was kind of an unwitting person in this?
Well, we'll let the indictment speak for itself, and certainly the evidence will come out in court. But it's clear, at least in the indictment, that what occurred here is that there were lucrative contracts awarded, and one of those contractors paid $5,000 in cash, and that money ended up in the mayor's pocket.
Can you tell us which projects you're referring to?
The indictment doesn't speak to that. Certainly that evidence will come out in court. The proceeding from here on in will be criminal, the way the criminal prosecution process works. We will hand over discovery to defense counsel, where they will be made aware of the specifics of that allegation. And then we will call witnesses at trial who will speak specifically to those allegations. But right now, I'm not going to go beyond the four corners of the